Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup CDL podcast. This is it, guys. This is it for the year. Champs 2023. This is the last major of, well, maybe there will be some Call of Duty still later this year, but for now, this is gonna be it. I am joined, as always, by my co-host CDLMetrics. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It's just kind of crazy that we're already here at Champs, but yeah, recording this a little earlier than usual, just because it's Champs. It's a big deal. We want to get this out early for as many years as we can. So, yeah, Champs is just next week. It's crazy to think about. It's in Las Vegas. That's exciting. I'm a little envious of the folks who are going. It should be a lot of fun. Good venue at the UNLV campus. Um, but yeah, happy that Rocker made it, obviously. We'll talk about them more specifically later on. But as a Rocker fan, I am a little surprised that they hung on to their seat and actually moved up a couple spots, considering that they had a good Major 5. Much like their Major 2, I want to say, or Major 3 performance, where they finished third. So, yeah, good enough to get the 6th seed, actually, which, if you asked me a month ago, will Rocker have the 6th seed or better at Champs, I would have said definitely not. But here we are. A little bummed Vegas didn't make the run to grab the 8th seed from Seattle, but nonetheless, it was still a fun watch for that. And yeah, obviously some big surprises for Major 5. Rockers run. New York win again. They're the only team to repeat this year. Optic kind of just flopped out unexpectedly. So yeah, Major 5 was a little chaotic. I enjoyed watching it. But yeah, it was all just table setting for this moment here. So
Yeah.
excited to talk about champs.
So before we do talk about champs, though, let's bring up some news that's been happening in the CDL. Again, we're going to briefly touch on this. Our main focus here is champs, and I think a lot of this news is in flux. So about a week ago, it was announced that the Toronto Defiant Overwatch team, which is also owned by the same team that owns the same organization that owns Toronto Ultra, they have had all of their franchise fees basically, what's the right word? Not exempted. Forgiven, I guess is the correct word. So they obviously had franchise fees, and all the Overwatch teams and all the CDL teams did, and they were scheduled to pay them back proportionately annually, and then um, basically in 2020. During the pandemic, those repayments were frozen. I don't think they've basically started again, and it appears as though all Overwatch teams are going to have all of their franchise fees repaid. The question now is what's going to happen to the CDL. Obviously, you're going to have pretty strong calls for the CDL to do exactly the same. I expect they will. There will be an owners meeting in Vegas. It has not been announced whether or not that's happening or not, but I suspect you're going to have either at least full forgiveness or most forgive or over like a large amount of forgiveness for those fees. Additionally, it has been announced that the YouTube, basically the CDL and YouTube are going to offer into an exclusive streaming deal for the next 2 years. Um, the thing is, we don't have any specifics on it in terms of price. However, the only comment, well, there's been two comments from owners. Hex, owner of Optic, has said there's no way they could be doing this because we haven't had a conversation. No one's told me about this, and we have an owners meeting in a couple of weeks. So him basically saying there's no way they could do this without us approving it. And Nade Shot has said in a comment that someone posted something saying that media rights are important to help esports teams. Nade Shot said the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this one, referring to the basically the premium they're getting for exclusivity to YouTube versus having a much larger audience per se on Twitch. So this is obviously interesting. Again, it was been hinted that something like this was going to be happening for a bit because uh, earlier there was a lot of talk about in that one financial statement from Activision. It said that they were going to try to fix problems with the CDL and the Overwatch League, and that those attempts might be unsuccessful, which is very ominous. But it appears as though the goal is minimize cost of the franchises, get them profitable, and use an exclusivity deal, hopefully a fat one, but potentially just an exclusivity deal. And then again, this basically the CDL would rely on some revenue from this deal as well because they have their basically fees, like they have the coverage fees and all the stuff. So on one hand, you can say, okay, they're trying to stabilize the franchises so you don't keep having them constantly bought in and bought out. But additionally, it is concerning that they're screaming for this deal when at least Nate Shot, who again we have no idea if he's actually seen the deal or not, or if other ones have seen the deal or not. We have no idea if they're saying. The first comment we have appears to say that this deal is currently not worth it. It appears as though the CEO is trying to cut costs, maximize profits, so this thing can go back into the black as soon as possible. Potentially either to sell this thing off or whatever. I'm a little concerned. I don't know exactly how this is going to look going forward, but we're probably going to hear more about this very soon, probably right after Chaps. What do you think about this?
So, from a fan perspective, obviously a lot of fans aren't gonna like the news because many people prefer to watch on Twitch, and I totally get it. We all had to watch on Twitch early this season when the CDL wasn't on YouTube yet, and it's a good experience. Like you can have the multi streams going. The chat on Twitch is obviously much more active than it is on YouTube. Um, and yeah, it makes sense. It's to be like a home of esports. With that though, right, we knew the CDL wasn't getting an exclusivity deal from Twitch, or if they were, it was small, but I'm pretty sure that they weren't getting anything. Whereas they did have one with YouTube for the first 3 years of the league. Um, a lot of fans complained it wasn't on Twitch, it wasn't on both, whatever. And eventually the CDL pivoted back to being on YouTube and on Twitch this summer, or this spring, I should say. So yeah, we've as a fan we've been back and forth, and like I get that most people prefer Twitch. I actually do prefer YouTube for the streaming, um, mostly because I'm just more familiar with the YouTube platform. Um, on my PlayStation console, I sometimes will watch the streams, and if I'm watching it on the Twitch stream, I can't pause. Like the features on the Twitch app for PlayStation specifically aren't great. But on YouTube, there's a little more. There's the pause feature. There's some other stuff. So as a fan, like I'm gonna watch the matches wherever they are, whether it's Twitch, whether it's YouTube, whether it's either. I'm fine with that. For the league perspective, and I know we talked about this a little bit, last week or 2 weeks ago, a month ago, whenever it was, that the last thing you want if you're the CDL is for the Los Angeles Guerrillas to be an example for other organizations in the league, right? You don't want to have this 12-team league for 4 years and now it's all of a sudden a 10-team league or an 8-team league, or like if you are shrinking your team size, like that's just gonna scare off investors, potential sponsors. It's just clear evidence that like this thing isn't working. So as the league, right, you have to encourage teams to stay in, to just generate more cash flow. And if you can do that by getting, a big chunk of money from YouTube to stream, I get it. Now, there's obviously the cost analysis of, okay, well you have more eyeballs if you're on Twitch, and that's true. Like the streams on Twitch from earlier this year were huge, especially when you compare them to majors of past years and whatnot. So I get that. You get more eyeballs if you're on Twitch. You get the most eyeballs if you're on everything. Um, but if the cash flow helps the league, that's a good thing in my opinion. You have to stay afloat. You have to, share that revenue with the teams in the league in order to keep them afloat. There's a lot of financial stuff that I'm not an expert on, but like I get that you need money to keep the league running. Now, Nate Shot also made some interesting points on the fact that like if you're an esports league, you actually really don't have to make a profit in order to keep running, because a lot of the profit you get from the game, like microtransactions, people purchasing the game, like that revenue is also shared with Activision. So it's all one big pot of money. It's just this, Call of Duty League part of that is maybe a loss. So Could you operate at a loss? Yeah, and maybe they have been for the past year or two or since they've been around, but it's an interesting point Nate Shot brings up. Obviously, he and Hex and whoever you consider to be the big boys of the league, like they're gonna want to be on the platforms where there are the most eyeballs because they make a ton of money on selling merch and people buying their team packs. And if you're the most popular team already, you really just want eyeballs, like wherever they are. You don't necessarily care about the cash flow because your organization is doing fine already. It's the Minnesota Rockers of the world, it's the Seattle Surges of the world, the Las Vegas Legions, who like they can't generate the same revenue because they're just not nearly as popular as Optic Texas, as LA Thieves, as Atlanta FaZe. So, right, if you're those other, 8, 9 teams, that revenue sharing matters a lot, right? If the league can hand out money to keep your organization afloat while also, being a spotlight for your team, you can obviously get winnings from winning like events and stuff too. So there's a lot that goes into it, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have the secret sauce of what the league should do. I just know that to me it makes sense to move back to YouTube exclusively for now if it means you can get a big bag of money. And I also know Nadeshot said you'd be surprised with how low the number is. So I guess he would know already. I'm surprised that he would say that though, because if Hex didn't know that this deal had already gone through, how would Nadeshot know how much money it is from YouTube? So that to me doesn't make a ton of sense. Maybe he's just assuming that it's far less than it had been in years past. I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns here, but we'll see how it plays out. Right? We'll be on YouTube next year. For me, that's fine. I'll watch the league wherever it is, including YouTube. I get the gripes that people have, and one last thing, and we can put a ribbon on this at the end here, just because we got champs to talk about. But um, one other thing is, I do worry about the people who are like, you have to go to Twitch because that's the place to be, and I do think that's just kind of a limited mindset. Like to think that YouTube gaming, that the YouTube streaming platform couldn't one day grow and match Twitch or exceed Twitch's popularity in the gaming sphere, I think is flawed. Like YouTube is a humongous platform. Um and like I don't know, maybe they don't, but I don't know. It seems Tactical Rab has some thoughts on like YouTube could grow into that. They have been making improvements, and I agree with him. Like they've been on the right track. There's still some way to go. Um, but yeah, I think if you can get some money now and help this league stay afloat, maybe expand in the not too distant future, that's a good thing. So that's my overall thoughts on it. I know that was a lot, but yeah, I mean, I'll be here next season watching CDL wherever it is, but it sounds like it'll be YouTube.
I also kind of have concerns that, and this is the last thing. I'll just throw this in there because I've said multiple times that like when you watch it on Twitch, and next weekend I'll be watching this on Twitch. When and if it's on YouTube, of course, that is far from a barrier for me to watch the CDL. That's not even close. And obviously, there's nothing like that at all. But the thing is, when you're watching on Twitch, when you're watching this and you log into Twitch and you see the streams, you see the Call of Duty League stream and you see Scump's stream, and they're usually Scump's stream is actually having more people than the official CDL stream, and then there's other ones who also have significant ones as well. I gotta feel like at some point someone in the CDL is probably a little pissed off that Scump is kind of eating their lunch. And although that's not the right way to think about it, I kind of feel like some executive somewhere, and again, we know there's some NFL people involved in this. I gotta feel like some NFL people are a little pissed off that that's happening, and I think that's a huge concern for the CDL and for them. So I think in some ways them basically stopping the watch parties is actually viewed as a positive for them rather than a negative. But that's beside the point.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I think they do want to keep watch parties going. I get what you're saying about like it just feels weird to have Scump, having more viewership than the official CDL stream. But like I get it at the same time.
Well, at the same,
So
here's the thing: they're paying for all this on-air talent. They're paying for this analysis. They're paying for all this stuff. I guarantee you, they're saying, "Well, why are we paying for all these casters now when people are just going to listen to Scump anyway?" Right? Why are we paying for? Okay, yeah, you need the codcasters, and that's fine. You need to produce it, but like, they're going to be like, "Why do we need the analyst desk if they're just watching Scump anyway? Because Scump's going to talk on top of them." So like, I think this is the problem, and I think they don't understand that have you can encourage viewership in multiple ways. And in actuality, you should probably give Scump his own, like, or not Scump per se, but you should have a feed dedicated to the watch parties where, like, yeah, they're gonna just have the game audio and not the commentator audio on top of it. Like, that's something they should do rather than whatever the heck it is that they do. Like, but again, these are not people who are dedicated to this. They don't know it that well. So, but anyways, moving on to champs gambling. That's what we're here for. First game of champs: subliners versus rocker. Now, for some reason, sorry. Do we want to do futures first?
I'm good with either.
Okay,
So
well, actually, we'll do futures first quickly.
okay.
So for some reason, betting lines are not on Bodog, but betting lines are on Bet365. So don't worry, we're going to talk about numbers and lines. I'll just quickly do the outrights, and again, there's only 8 outright market: phase to win 2-1, optic so 2-1 or plus 200, optic plus 350, ultra plus 350. But weirdly, ultra, the U in ultra isn't capitalized, but that's fine. Subliners plus 450, Thieves plus 500, Boston 25-1, Surge 33-1, and Rocker 50-1. Those are prices on Bovada. I think I kind of view this the same way. I think probably one of those 5 teams is gonna win, and then Breach, Surge, and Rocker are kind of afterthoughts. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that assessment. The thing of it is, I still like. It just seems like FaZe is just every time we do this. Every time it's like FaZe is the best team, and how like for what the last 2 years now. Every time I'm like, well, FaZe is the best team, and they finally won a major this year, so good for them. But like, it just seems like every time we do this, it's like FaZe is, and like this is why they're 200, not like plus 120 or something. It's like sure they're the best team, but it's still like yeah they could not win this. Looking at Optic, they had a horrible Major 5, but to be fair, they were kind of due for some regression, though. But again, the question is how, like, I think they're still a really, really good team. I don't think they're a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. If they get hot, they can make a run. Ultra, too. I mean, Ultra was pretty close, right? That was the Ultra versus Subliners. If Ultra didn't. If Ultra was basically if Ultra won one of the hard points because they lost map 1 and 4, suddenly that's a 3-1 Ultra. They then get to go play against Rocker, and then Subliners crush Rocker 3-0. I'd expect Toronto would win probably 3-0 or 3-1. And then cool, now they're against FaZe for the winner of Major 5, and then that could have gone Toronto's way as well, right? Because I think Toronto's actually a better hardpoint team. So there is there's a lot of questions about like Ultra could go on a run. Subliners, I think it's less likely. I think the plus 450 price is warranted. But they did just win the last event. Are they peaking at the right time? I don't know. I still think if you give me Optic or you give me Ultra at plus money, like you give me plus 120 Ultra or plus 120 Optic against them, I'm taking Ultra or Optic. And then Thieves, no idea what's wrong with Thieves. They got they did take out Optic, which is cool, but then they got taken out by Ultra pretty easily. So I kind of think Thieves are overvalued in the betting market here, and then Breach, Surge, and Rocker. I don't particularly have much to say to them. Rocker did increase their placement in the like they increased their lead in the standings, but at the same time, the second they started facing tougher competition like FaZe and Subliners, they didn't win a single map. So this has been a very up and down year for Rocker this year. Lots of questions about them. I don't know. I think although I don't love it, and I'm probably not going to place the bets. I think you got to bet Optic or Ultra here. I think you have to bet one of them. Maybe the problem is you can't really bet both of them because at plus 350, you're kind of hurting yourself there. Like if they were both 10 to 1, I'd say sure, but they're both plus 350, so you're not really getting much value there. Um, Highest KD ratio. I mean, Scrappy's pretty good. Scrappy could have a pretty high KD ratio. 8 to 1. That's not a bad bet actually. Map specials, whatever. I don't know. That's the features I'm seeing. What do you see in the futures market?
Yeah, so specifically to win outright, just because that's, the most popular of the bunch, I would say. These prices to me are so spot on. I don't think we've had a major yet this year where I just haven't been interested in much of anything. Um, and it also goes into what I said about a month ago, early May, phase was plus 325. At that point, I just took that because I figured the price once we got to champs would be drastically different. It would be much higher, and it is. So, we'll see if that ends up cashing out. I do think FaZe is the best team still. They're just there every event. Like, I don't think there was an event this year where they were outside of the top three. They won once, so that was back at Major 2, but they're just consistently there. Like, you can just bank on FaZe being there, every Sunday. Now, for this tournament, Sunday means you're in the championship game, and I do think FaZe will make it there. Will they win? That's to be determined. But, like, yeah, to me, they're just a consistent force. This team, like this core three that they have with Celium, Simp, and Abizi, it's just locked and loaded. They're gonna be there at the end. And I think they're well set up to do that again. They have the 1 seed. Now, we thought that 1 seed meant they were going to get Rocker or Legion. It ends up being Seattle Surge, which honestly, at this point, like Surge is what we thought Rocker or Legion were going to be anyway. So to me, that's a very easy way to start. Then you have the 4-5 game that could be a little trickier with, I believe that's Toronto versus LA Thieves. But in the end, I believe in FaZe. The best of 9 structure is still very favorable to a team that's great at search and destroy, and they are still by far the best, especially now that Legion are gone. So, yeah, to me, FaZe, if they can get to that finals, they got a good shot. Um, I do want to give some props to New York subliners, though. Obviously, they just won the last event. They won Major 1 as well. But New York, in order to beat Atlanta, like if you told me before that grand finals of Atlanta versus New York at Major 5, if you told me FaZe were going to win both controls, let me just take a look at this so I don't accidentally missay what actually happened. If you would have told me FaZe win, yeah, Himmelmat Expo control, an Elisilo control, and they split the hard points with New York, I would have said, oh yeah, okay, FaZe will win one of the 3 search and destroys. That did not happen. So that was a shock. It goes to show that New York search has improved drastically, and we saw that over last weekend. Like New York's map count on the weekend was spectacular. Their search still looks great. Their hardpoint looks great. Their control is still a little shaky, but solid. Um, but what I do want to say with New York is like I still don't think like they're not quite on FaZe's level yet. I know they just beat them, but I got to see it again. And I know that's hard to say because we're at the last event, but I just need a little more consistency. And it wasn't clean for New York. They did lose to Toronto in winners round 1. And that's a feather in the cap for Toronto Ultra, right? They were the only team last weekend that were able to beat New York. Both series were a 3-2, so they're very evenly matched. Obviously New York beat Atlanta 4-3. So a lot of close wins, but nonetheless wins. And yeah, they're hot at the right time. I think you said that already, that could they do what Thieves did last year and go back to back and just be the best team at the end of the year? Yeah, I totally think that. So they're plus 450 to win outright. I don't hate. I think that's probably my second favorite behind FaZe. Even FaZe 2 to 1, I just think they're going to be there in the end. And when it gets to the end, you're not going to have a plus 200. So that's kind of where I'm at with the outright market. Otherwise, like Toronto at plus 350, you can totally justify. I I can't get there with Optic at plus 350. What we just saw was super concerning, right? I mean, they didn't win a map, and they had relatively easy matches at Major 5. I know they've had some illnesses that they've been dealing with, and that might be a reason why they were shaky, but still a little bit cause for concern.
Well, just a point there. The two teams
Yeah.
they played went immediately after playing them winless. I don't think Florida won a single map. Like Thieves got a. Oh no, I think Thieves won one more match. But like again, the
Yeah.
record of them, it's not like none of those teams made Sunday. Like didn't win a single map, and none of those to teams that didn't even make Sunday. So not particularly great.
Yeah, yeah. So to my point, I mean, yeah, Optic at plus 350, that to me should have dropped a little bit. Like I do think they should be behind Toronto. They should be behind New York. Um, but they're not. They're up there with those teams, and I get it. Like they went on those crazy runs at Major 3 and Major 4 where they had back to back second place finishes. But it's just like I I don't know. There's still doubt for me that they're gonna get it done. Of all these teams, they're the team that hasn't won a major all year. Um, they've been close a couple times, but you got to win one, and they just haven't been able to. So that worries me a little bit. LA Thieves are way overpriced, in my opinion. Just going back to my belief in Toronto Ultra, I have Toronto power ranked as the number 2 team in the game. Um, LA Thieves, you know, that's the second worst matchup you could get in winners bracket round 1 outside of FaZe, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, Thieves could very well get bounced down to losers bracket right away. Now, losers bracket in this format isn't a death sentence like it sometimes is, because right, like you're basically one round further ahead when you drop down to losers, as opposed to how you drop down at a normal major. So could Thieves lose right away and go on a crazy run to make Sunday? I absolutely, we've seen that from them already this year. But yeah, to me, they've been a little shaky lately. The qualifiers weren't great. The major wasn't that great. It's just weird because I thought, after they won Major 3, it's like, okay, here we go again. They're gonna round into form, and it just has very much gone the opposite way with that team. So at 5-1, I'm totally out on that. That's probably my least favorite on the outrights board. And then the long shots, like, not super interested in any of them. Boston would be you know, the team of those three that I'm most interested in at 25-1. They have a roster change, right? We don't know what that means. This new kid, Snoopy, I think his name is, could be amazing. And like maybe Boston just get really, really good all of a sudden. And, variance is good when you're, taking a huge underdog. So to me, yeah, Boston 25-1. They're running into Optic in round 1, who look, right, last we saw them, they looked really bad. So that's a winnable game for them, and maybe they go on a run after that. Seattle have Atlanta, so I'm not interested in that. And Minnesota, like, I still believe Minnesota are the worst team of these 8, despite grabbing the 6th seed, just because so many of their, CDL points that they accumulated this year were based off of 2 majors where they finished 3rd place. And in both of those majors, they had 2-2 match records, like 2 wins, 2 losses. They were in the exact same fashion. And it's like, it goes to show that finishing, 3rd isn't that difficult if you navigate the major the right way. And with both times with Minnesota, they started in the winners bracket, they won their first 2 matches, got a little lucky with who they were playing, right? Like Minnesota, who did they play round 1 at Major 5? I want to say Breach. I don't quote me on that, but they had a winnable game 1. We thought they were gonna have to play Optic in round 2. Oh, turns out it's Florida. That's a nice break. They go on to beat Florida and then just get demolished by 2 actually good teams. A very similar path to what happened at Major 2, I believe, where they made Sunday, they ran into FaZe, almost took out FaZe in the winners final, and then proceeded to get swept in the losers final by, uh, I don't remember who, but regardless, yeah, just lucked into a couple third place finishes, ended up boosting their seed. They don't have to play phase now, which is good, but they're still a little shaky in my opinion. So yeah, to me, the outright market, not great. The MVP market, again, if you're like me and you think FaZe has a really, really good chance to take it home, I do think a BZ makes some sense in the MVP market. Perhaps Celium. It all really just depends on who ends up with the higher KD when all is said and done. I suppose now Celium is behind a BZ in terms of MVP odds, so maybe he's the way to go. Um, Otherwise, yeah, to reach the final, I do talk about most majors, and I do see a little bit of value in that market, specifically with New York. They're plus 175 just to reach the final. I do like that value just a little bit. And actually, a long shot I did already talk about that I kind of like, but I like them more in this market is again Boston Breach. They're 12 to 1 just to reach the final. Um, could they get lucky with this new lineup? Navigate the winners bracket with relative ease? Maybe. And at 12 to 1, I think that's enough of value where I'll take some of that. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, there's so much stuff you can take this weekend. You can take the exact point at which a team will be eliminated, which I think is really interesting and just I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can do that. You can have like the most played hard point map, search map, control map. I haven't really looked at those at all, but hey, if you want to have some fun and do something with that, go ahead. Um, but yeah, overall, I think it's phases at the end of the day. I know that's the boring, chalky pick, but I will take phase. I'll take phase over New York. I think they get revenge for Major Five, and yeah, that's where I'm at for this one.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I one thing I will say, and I'll just add to your point here about phase and that from last major. Thieves, after beating Optic 3-0, they then beat London Royal Ravens 3-0, who again, their London Super Bowl was beating Boston 3-1. And then after beating Ravens 3-0, they then lost 3-0 to Ultra. Florida, who beat Optic 3-0, they then went 0-6 in their next six maps, losing 3-0 to Rocker and then losing 3-0 to Subliners. So, again, Optic got beat by teams that also were like not particularly good. So it was not a good performance by them. The thing of it is looking at the bracket for next weekend. Toronto, like basically the top bracket is pretty nuts. You've got FaZe, Surge, Ultra Thieves, winner of FaZe and Surge playing Ultra and Thieves, and then basically the winner of that game then going on to the winners finals. Like that's tough. You're basically if assuming both favorites win, you're looking at an Ultra versus FaZe matchup, and then again at that point, then yeah, okay, maybe you have FaZe at two to one, and then you have Thieves at, or sorry, you have FaZe at 2 to 1, and you have Ultra at plus 350. Okay, that's fine. But then one of those emerges from that. The bottom bracket, though, you've got Optic Boston. That's the top part of it, and the bottom part of it is Subliners Rocker. So, like, if I'm looking at a team and if I'm Optic, I think beating Subliners is definitely possible if they get hot. Versus, I think if all like I don't know. I think this could be very interesting. This could be a very interesting game, a very interesting weekend. Some stuff could happen on those markets. Now let's talk about the match markets here. So, first match of the weekend is Subliners versus Rocker. Subliners are minus 700 on the money line. Rocker plus 400. Minus 1.5, minus 200 for Subliners. Plus 1.5, plus 150 for Rocker. Over 3.5, minus 225. Under 3.5, plus 162. My model absolutely loves Subliners here. Again, the model saw that Minnesota is better than the bottom teams in the league. Well, guess what? The bottom teams are gone now. The bottom teams are gone now. Everybody left is Sharks. I've got Subliners at 98.3% chance to win this. Sorry, and I've got the minus 2.5. I price it at minus 110. Um, I kind of think that's a bit excessive. Um, but the model likes it, so I'm going with the model there. You can get the minus 2.5 at plus 175. That's actually pretty half decent value, and we just saw this matchup. Subliners just beat Rocker 3-0. So I, uh, that's my take on that game. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm actually this is an interesting position to be in because I do kind of like subliners in the futures market. I actually think this is kind of a natural hedge opportunity for Rocker. And this is coming from a Rocker fan who really doesn't believe in them. Like maybe they get top six. That would be cool, but otherwise, like they're probably not going to do anything. Now, again, part of the reason why I like the subliners is, well, they just won Major Five, and you just mentioned it. Their path to like navigating the winners bracket isn't all that hard, right? They get Rocker round one, which to me is the easiest matchup you could possibly have. Then you run into an Optic or Boston team that like both went horribly out of Major Five. Like someone's gonna win that match, and I right most people would say Optic. I would say Optic probably win against Boston, but if New York, like you're feeling really confident against either of those teams, having come off a major win, having beat Rocker in round one, like I expect subliners to be favorites in that match, regardless of who it is. And on the off chance that it's Boston, like really, really good chance subliners are just in the winners bracket final having to play Atlanta or Toronto. So that's again part of the reason why I like subliners in the futures. For this match specifically, I actually do think Rocker plus a map and a half is good value. I see that at plus 150. Um, Part of the reason why is control. I think these teams actually are pretty close in control. It was kind of the one game mode for New York at Major Five that was a bit of a concern. Hardpoint and search were fantastic. Their search is improving at a phenomenal rate. And I think that's where the difference is in this match is New York can dominate search and destroy. I have them as pretty good favorites in hardpoint, but I don't think it's unrealistic to think that Rocker squeak out a control win and can split the hard points with New York. It's still an uphill climb, but the payout is plus 150. So I don't mind that. I think it should be a little closer to even money on both sides for that plus 1.5, minus 1.5. So I'll lean Rocker plus a map and a half. I don't love the money line. I think my numbers are still a little too low on subliners money line because I've got them at a 75% chance to win. I do think, in my heart, it probably should be more like an 80% chance to win. But yeah, to me, I think New York get it done, but a natural hedge just kind of makes sense where if New York get it done in a 3-2 fashion, then it's golden because subliners are still alive and Rocker covered that plus 1.5. So I guess not a hedge, more of a middle, I suppose would be the term, but that's kind of where I'm coming from on this one specifically. And as a Rocker fan, like, hey, if you put up a fight and lose, like, that's all I can hope for. My expectations for this champs are relatively low. So as long as you can put up a fight and not get swept by them again, to me that's success. So yeah, I'll actually lean Rocker here plus 1.5. I'm a little surprised by that, but nonetheless, I think it's just a good middling opportunity if you're someone like me who likes subliners a little bit in the futures market.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, Moving on to the next match of the champs, Phase versus Surge. Phase minus 600 on the money line. Surge plus 350. Phase minus 1.5 minus 175. Surge plus 1.5 plus 125. Over 3.5 same price as before minus 225. Under plus 162. Again, absolutely love Phase here. I've got this even higher, 99.2 to 0.8% chance of
Wow.
Surge. Yeah, I know. Big. But the thing is, though, Surge in some cases does have a habit of taking out Phase in random times. But my model loves Phase here. And now, could it be wrong? Sure. I don't think so. But I'm taking Phase. You can get the minus 1.5 plus 200. Love that. Phase map 1 minus 22.5. That sounds awesome. Minus 2.5. I mean, my model likes it in the search and destroy, but I'm not a huge fan of that. I'll take the minus 1.5 in the control though. My model just hates this surge team, and this surge team is done. Right, like It is very clear Pred is a free agent. It is very clear he is going to be replacing Hook. Um, it's a very clear that this Surge team is not going to exist in its current form next year, and I think this might just be it. The question though is there anything that, like, if Surge won champs, maybe they'd stay together, but like if they lost in the finals, maybe, but like I think this Surge team is done, and I think they know it, and I think they're like we're done here, we're done, we're not messing around with this anymore. What are your thoughts on this one?
I don't know. We're at odds again. It sounds like I would just say, to me, this match compared to the first one we just talked about, Rocker versus New York, I copy and paste everything I just said about Rocker New York and apply it to Seattle versus Atlanta. I am someone who kind of likes Atlanta in the futures market, but I see this Seattle price as maybe a natural middling opportunity. I get that Seattle have been right just downhill ever since Major One. Right, they were runners up at Major One. We were like, hey, they could make some noise this year, and since then it's just been kind of not great. Like, yeah, they deserve to have the 8 seed. You know, it wasn't that far off that Legion could have stolen it from them, and they were just out of the picture completely. But nonetheless, they held on due to some good luck. So yeah, they're not a team that you're like thrilled about, but to me, Seattle is a team that's well designed to cover a map and a half, especially against a team like FaZe, who, yes, they've been improving in hardpoint as of late, but they're still beatable. That's still Seattle's strength is hardpoint, even though they've been getting a little worse in that mode. So, and to me, the control is going to be close. I do side with Atlanta. Seattle's just a weird team when it comes to control. They still are the only team that have not played Expo control. I imagine that continues moving forward. But it's not like FaZe was great on Expo anyway. So if that's vetoed automatically, FaZe probably shrug their shoulders and say, all right, we'll play on one of the other two maps and see how it goes from there. But to me, the path for Seattle to win the control as a slight underdog and split both hard points, I think is very much on the table. So to me, I see this one going a lot like the first one, where Atlanta should be heavy favorites. I've got them as a 79% favorite, so even higher than New York. Um, but yeah, to me, like Atlanta's still vulnerable a little bit in those respawn modes where Seattle have had success throughout the year. Yes, it's been waning, but to me, a plus 125 to just force that map 5, I think is good enough. So again, ideal scenario for me would be FaZe win in a 3-2 fashion, which they've loved to do this year. That's kind of their bread and butter just because they're so dominant in search and destroy. So yeah, I'm just kind of hoping that that same blueprint comes through. FaZe in a 3-2, and Seattle takes that plus 125 to the bank and drops down to the lower bracket. So that's kind of where I see it. It's a lot like Minnesota, New York, but just with a much better team in Atlanta here. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I do think Seattle has an ability to upset a team like FaZe. Like, we talk about Seattle a lot as this hot cold team. Lately they've been more cold than they have been hot, but I don't know, that might that flip a week from now when they face FaZe? Maybe. Yeah, like absolutely. So um yeah, that's kind of where I stand on this one. No interest in Seattle futures though. Obviously they have the toughest opponent in round 1 and are gonna have a tough opponent in round 2 in either Toronto or Thieves. So to me, they're very, very likely to finish top 8, which makes sense considering they're the 8 seed. But yeah, I think they could at least force the game 5 here and make things a little interesting.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I'm going with what my model has, right? That's the thing. So next up, we've got Optic versus Boston. So now again, this one's going to be kind of interesting. Can Optic bounce back, or is this going to be is Boston gonna to put them in the dirt? Now again, Boston did make a team change. They replaced Vivid for, I'm sorry, some random guy. I don't know who he is. I'm sure he's a great Call of Duty player, but this is not generally the time you want to be making team changes. He's like Snoopy or something. Again, I have questions about the direction of this Boston Breach team. But anyways, the official lines are Optic minus 334 on the money line, Boston plus 240, Optic minus 1.5 minus 120, Boston plus 1.5 minus 120. So basically minus 120 each way on the minus 1.5 plus 1.5. Over 4.5 plus 162. Under 4.5 minus 225. My model's got Optic 3-1 here. 84.4% chance of an Optic win. Love them in the hard point and the search, and maybe struggle a bit in the control, but then they take it back in game 4 search. Give me Optic here. I think if Optic had a huge meltdown there, I think they're gonna fix it. Hopefully, but my model does like Optic here, and I think I'm gonna take them on the. I'm gonna take them. You can't really take them on the main line. You can take the minus 1.5. Maybe sprinkle something on the minus 2.5. That's not horrible. That's about the same price, but you could bet some of the spreads. You can bet minus 32.5 hard point spread. That's fine. Boston was really bad at hard point. You could bet some of these other spreads. So, but that's my take on that. What do you have there?
Yeah, this is a weird one. Obviously, Boston coming off a really bad major, Optic coming off a really bad major as well. Um, yeah, it's tricky, right? This team change for Boston is a little bit of a head scratcher. I get it in the sense that okay, Major 5 was horrible. Like if you're Boston and you finish top 12, that is not what you were looking to do. So you make another roster move. I We'll see if it works. I know Snoopy I think was like teaming with Beans earlier this year on the academy roster and with Kremp. So I guess they've just kind of built an academy roster around Awakening at this point. That's just kind of how it's turned out. Um, we'll see. Right, Minnesota made a head scratcher roster move, and it worked out for the better. And that was pretty profitable as well because the price got way out of hand. I am kind of the belief that that might have happened here as well. Like both of these teams looked really bad last weekend, and I know more goes into it than that, but I don't know. This Boston price seems to think that okay, Boston with this roster move just got worse. And like I think I don't know yet. It's not a definitive yeah, Boston got worse because they subbed out Vivid for this new kid. So to me it looks a lot like those rocker, matchups. The first week they announced Attach is in for Afro and Attach was going to be an AR and Fame was going to move to an SMG and it was just a lot of confusion and people going like, how can you bench Afro? He's by far your best player. If the teams tested this out and it works, then I have to assume that Boston will be as good as they were, if not a little better. Um, so to me, again, I'm at odds with you. This doesn't happen most weeks, but for here it is, I guess. Boston, I do kind of like more so on the money line than to cover a map and a half. And right now I see the money line at plus 240. I've got Boston at a 36% chance to win. So to me, right, that number should be closer to like plus 200, something like that, but it's up at plus 240. So I'll take that. Yeah, I mean, if you listened to our podcast before Major 5, you would have known I was a little out on Optic. I do think they had a chance to make a run. I didn't expect that they'd just fall out top 12. I don't think anybody did. But yeah, as someone who is already not a huge fan of where Optic was, to me, they're still overpriced here. You look at the futures market, I don't like their price in any really like to win outright to reach the finals. In this match, to me, it's not really a natural hedge or a natural middle. It's just I think people are, you know, not in love with the Boston Breach roster move, and because of that, their price has dipped a little too much, in my opinion. So, yeah, for Boston, the blueprint, I guess, to win is you got to win control. That's kind of a given for everybody. I do have them as slight favorites in control, so we'll see if that stays. But yeah, if you're Boston, like you're not as good in hardpoint, you're not as good in search, but could you split those two modes and win the control? Like, yeah, I kind of think that's their path. Probably going to have to be a 3-2 for Breach. If you're an Optic fan, really hope that Optic can win this in a 3-1 or a 3-0 fashion because if it goes to a 3-2, I'm just like I think Optic can pull it out in a game 5, obviously, but it's just more worry that, like, okay, this team maybe has lost a step for whatever reason. So yeah, it's a really interesting game when you look at just where these teams are heading into the major. But to me, I'll lean with Boston here ever so slightly. I don't love it, but yeah, I don't know if I'll take this specific match just because I do have a little bit on Boston just to reach the champs final at 12-1. And in order for that to happen, they probably have to win this game anyway. So for me, probably a stay away. But if you're an Optic fan, just do not be surprised if Optic lose or, win, but look like a little struggled. So that's all I'll say.
Well, we're on completely opposite sides for all three of these.
Yeah.
That's all right. So let's see the last one. Can we come back in alignment here? Ultra versus Thieves. Ultra minus 180 to the money line. Thieves plus 132. Uh, minus 1.5 for Ultra plus 120. Plus 1.5 minus 163 for Thieves. Over 4.5 plus 150. Under 4.5 minus 200. I've got this as a 3-2. I've got Ultra with a 56% chance, so slightly under market for this. I've priced the minus 1.5 at plus 182, so not great value. Kind of weird that Toronto destroyed Thieves 3-0, and yet, I mean, I think it's because Ultra lost the 2 hard points to New York, which is why the model doesn't love them in another hardpoint rematch against these. And the hardpoint was close against these two, to be fair. But I gotta take Ultra here. I'm probably not gonna bet it, but I'm gonna take them here, and I'm probably just gonna be like, cool, we're gonna just forget this happened and just go with it. I guess, right? It's very hard. Like, I think this Ultra team could be good. I think they're gonna beat this Thieves team. I just don't know in how many games. That's why I'm probably gonna stay away from some of those markets. Maybe play a couple of prop like the map spreads or something. So we'll see from there. So. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with you in this sense that, like, I don't love this game whatsoever. Yeah, to me this is just a complete stay away. Um Honestly, like, if you have a strong lean on either of these teams, I don't know how you could. It's just right, like, I get that Thieves have struggled lately, but at the same time, they, like Seattle Surge, are kind of a hot cold team. Could they flip it in an instant? Absolutely. And Toronto have been more of a consistent force all year, but outside of major 3, like, a lot of majors where you'd be surprised at how low Toronto finished. Like, they just they didn't make Sunday as often as you think they would have. So to me, I do have Toronto favored here, 61%. So not an overwhelming favorite, but a nice, solid favorite. If this was football, they'd be like, -3, something like that, field goal favorite. But yeah, I don't know. To me, a lot of it comes down to what we play in control. If it's Elasilo, I love Toronto. If it's Greenberg Hotel, I might lean to Thieves there. I do have Toronto as the better team still on Hotel or El Asilo or Expo for that matter. Any map they play on Control, I do think Toronto are favored on because they're that good in that mode. But to me, Thieves are right there on Hotel. So if that ends up being the case, like, the Thieves price should be adjusted a little bit. If it's Elasilo, Toronto has a huge advantage on. And Expo is just, if I see that, it's a stay away because we just don't have enough data on that map, right? Thieves are 3-4, Toronto Ultra are 2-2. It's just a big unknown, right? You assume Toronto are better because they're better at the other two maps, but if I see Expo Control there, it's just an absolute stay away. If it's an Elasilo, I'll be a lot more comfortable with Ultra, and if it's Hotel, I'll feel a lot more comfortable with Thieves. So, TBD on what the map pool is for this series. We'll get there when we get there, but yeah, to me, all signs point to a Toronto 3-1. Um, I do think they have the advantage on control no matter what map it is. And I do lean slightly with them in hardpoint and in search. It's really, really close in those modes. So to see those teams split, I think is pretty likely. So you give the edge to the better control team in that scenario, and that's Toronto for me. So one other thing to consider, Toronto are the 4 seed, Thieves are the 5 seed. So Toronto should be able to pick whether they want Team A or Team B. So maybe a little bit of a baked in map veto advantage for Toronto Ultra. Maybe enough to get them over the hump and take the win. But, we'll see. I think it's by far the best game of the day next Thursday. It makes sense that this would be the last game of the day as opposed to Major 5, what we had the first day, where the schedule was just all out of whack. I think the CDL did it right this time. They've got Optic in the 3 spot. They've got Minnesota up first because they are the worst team in the league. So, or at champs, I should say. But yeah, ending it with Thieves versus Toronto is a big match. It's a 4-5 game. It feels like that. Winner likely plays FaZe in round 2. That, you know, assuming that FaZe can beat Surge, that'll be a really, really fun match moving forward. But yeah, right now Thieves versus Toronto, no strong lean. But if the control map, if the map set gets released early and the control is El Asilo, or if it's Hotel, maybe I can side with one team or the other. But yeah, right now I think it's just a sit back and enjoy the show kind of a match.
Yeah, I think so. Well, that is all of the matchups. Um, some matches of note. What do I have? Subliners versus phase. Did I program this wrong? Okay. Ultraverse. I have phase as favorites against Ultra. I have Optic as favorites against Subliners. Or no, sorry, Subliners favorite, massive favorite against Optic. So that's a bit
That makes
odd,
sense.
but
No, I buy that.
the
What do
thing
you
is,
have specifically for the odds for hypothetical New York versus Optic?
95%. That's
Okay,
too.
that's a little high.
Yeah,
So
the
I
thing
have
is.
it. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I've got it at a 52-48, leaning to New York. So it's really really close. Obviously, if both teams win,
The problem is like
that number should probably
Subliners.
stick. But
The problem is
yeah,
Subliners beat all the teams in Optic last two, right? Like, well, actually, except with the exception of Thieves, but they took out Florida, and then they took out the team that took out Thieves, right? So my model is like, oh, that's bad. My model is like, that's really bad then. Um, so yeah, it's interesting. I've got Optic beating thing though, but the question is though, like if Optic goes out there and crushes Boston, then those numbers obviously would change, right? So, um, it's gonna be interesting. I think we need to see the first round results. If they break out most of these, I expect like if Optic takes out destroys Breach, then I think Optic can make a deep run. I mean, first of all, obviously if they don't, then they're in deep trouble. But if they do, then I think they can. I think they can survive. So
yeah, and
they
not only like for that specific example, like if Optic come out in 3-0 Boston, I think it is important to note how it happens, right? Is it a 3-0 where Optic win 250 to 240 and 6-5 and 3-2? Or is it an Optic 3-0 where it's 250 to 120 and a 6-3 and a 3-0 in control? Like to me that it does matter how much they're winning by. Winning by margin to me means a lot. And especially if you're Optic, you're playing a Boston team that hasn't impressed. So if you come out and you win, but there's still neck and neck maps throughout the series, it's to me still a cause for concern for Optic moving forward. So if they can come out and look like the Optic from, stage 3, stage 4, and just come out and just, beat Boston in half an hour because these maps go so quickly, like then it's okay. Optic are here to play, forget about what happened at Major 5. Like, they are very much in play to win this whole thing if that's the case. But I'm a little hesitant that that will be the result. I just think, I think Optic will beat Boston. I just worry it's going to look a little sluggish. So that's where I stand with that. Plus, you got to play New York, presumably in the next round, who are one of the hottest teams, if not the hottest team in the game right now. So it's tricky. But in an ideal world, I think we have a phase versus ultra, an optic versus subliners, winners round two, and that's not a surprise. Those are all the higher seeded teams. I think if Thieves beat Toronto, seeing phase versus Thieves again would obviously be fireworks as well. But if Breach come out and upset, if Rocker somehow come out and upset New York, like I don't know. At champs, I kind of don't want to see that to happen just because I want these best teams facing each other as much as possible. So anytime there's an upset, I'm a little skittish on it. Um, but yeah, we'll obviously where we go from there. But I don't know. Any other hot takes, I guess, before we sign off? Any bold statements?
The CDL is going to look really different next year.
True, yeah. Yeah. New
I hope.
team. Florida Mutineers are out in place of the Miami Heretics.
Yeah,
And what's gonna happen to LAG? Yeah, it
and I
it
hope the
absolutely
format
will.
changes too. But yeah, I think this might be it for this particular iteration of the CDL, and uh, I want to hear some. I want to hear what the plans are. I want to hear what comes out of the meetings, and the CDL could look very, very different next year. So, but that's my take. I think for champs, I think it's a four-ish horse race. I don't include thieves in that. I think it's one of Optic, Phase, Ultra, Subliner. I think one of those four is going to win it. Honestly, you give me an argument they don't even need to include the other four teams, but whatever. We have to have 8 teams, so fine. But yeah, this is a four-horse race. So, anyways, thank you everybody for tuning in this year. We will be back hopefully in December. That's kind of questionable, but hopefully we'll be back in December. Until then, take care, everybody. And if you're listening on this channel, college football is starting very soon. Buck Metrics, my co-host for the College Football Podcast, we are going to be restarting the College Football Podcast again this year. Obviously, we had a blast last year, a lot of fun. We're going to be back very, very soon, just a couple weeks away. We're going to be starting previewing all the major conferences and then obviously weekly podcasts. And we're going to be doing full video this year. So you're going to have a different experience online. We're going to do a lot more content, hopefully expanding into YouTube Shorts. So yeah, a lot to look forward to this year, and we will see you then. Until then, everybody, and if you're not going to come for college football, and we'll see you hopefully in December. See you then, and yeah, enjoy champs and hopefully some changes next year. See you, everybody.